Chosen one, you ever felt like the whole world shook hands behind your back while smiling in your face? Have you ever been betrayed by the very people you protected, gaslighted by those you trusted most, used for your light, then discarded when you needed that same energy returned? And now you sit in the silence, wondering, did God even see any of it? Listen to me, chosen one. What if I told you all of it was preparing you for something greater? See, there's a soul trauma nobody talks about. It's the weight of being brilliant in a world that celebrates noise over wisdom. It's the ache of being overlooked while watching lesser lights get standing ovations. It's carrying an invisible burden knowing you've been quietly breaking and rising in secret, while society praises youth, glamour, and empty applause. But here's the truth they don't want you to know. You weren't being punished. You were being positioned. They didn't break you. They revealed who they were. You weren't forgotten. You were protected by isolation. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was divine restraint. Your tears weren't failure, they were sacred data. Every betrayal, every moment they used your light, then left you in darkness. It wasn't random cruelty. It was heaven separating the counterfeit from the authentic. You see, the brilliance of the chosen isn't always seen in applause. Sometimes it's seen in how loud the silence gets when you enter a room, how the fakes suddenly feel exposed, how the mediocre start explaining themselves without you saying a word. You weren't the target, beloved. You were the test, and they failed. Thank you to everyone supporting this message through super thanks. Your generosity isn't just seen, it's spiritual. You're not just giving, you're sowing light into truth that transforms souls. You didn't survive that betrayal for nothing. You survived because heaven still needs your light. And if you're watching this now, it's not by chance, it's by divine appointment. So if you've ever wondered why the ones you helped the most turned their back the fastest, then this message is yours. Declare it now. I've been underestimated for the last time, because what comes next will shift everything you thought you knew about why you were attacked. And now, let's go deeper. Your humility offended their ego. That's the truth nobody wants to admit. They couldn't understand how someone could carry power without needing to broadcast it on every corner. Your quiet confidence made their loud insecurity sound like static. They needed you to be dramatic, emotional, explosive, because that's the only language they understood. But you move different. They mistook your silence for weakness, not knowing silence is sacred when you're chosen. See, they were waiting for you to break, waiting for you to scream, cry, beg for validation like they would. They needed you to crumble so they could feel superior. But every day you stayed composed. Every moment you chose grace over gossip. It exposed the chaos they were trying to hide. Your stillness became their storm. You weren't quiet because you were broken. You were quiet because heaven told you to move in stealth. Think about David, young shepherd boy, overlooked by his own father. When the prophet came looking for the next king, his brothers saw someone too small, too young, too insignificant. But while they were making noise about their qualifications, David was in the fields, learning to trust God with his bare hands. That quietness wasn't weakness, it was preparation. The same hands that gently led sheep would soon hold a slingshot that toppled giants. Your silence wasn't submission, it was strategy. They wanted you to react because your reactions gave them ammunition. Every tear you shed in private, they wished you'd shed in public so they could screenshot your pain and use it as evidence against you. But something in your spirit knew better. Something deeper than logic told you to hold your tongue, hold your truth, hold your power until the right moment. That's when they started calling you names. Too sensitive, overreacting, dramatic, weak. They labeled your depth as dysfunction because they couldn't swim in waters that deep. Your emotional intelligence threatened their emotional immaturity. Your ability to feel everything made their numbness obvious. But here's what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, what their limited vision missed completely. They didn't know God was sharpening a sword in your silence. Every insult you absorbed without retaliating, that was steel being tempered. Every betrayal you endured without becoming bitter, that was a blade being refined. Every moment you chose to forgive instead of fight back, that was divine weaponry being forged in the furnace of your faith. They thought your kindness was naivety. They thought your forgiveness was foolishness. They thought your patience was weakness. But the whole time, heaven was watching, taking notes, collecting receipts, building something inside you that no enemy could break, no betrayal could bend, no rejection could reverse. Joseph knew this secret. Thrown in a pit by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, forgotten in prison, years of silence, years of serving others while his own dreams seemed dead. But that silence wasn't punishment, it was positioning. Every injustice was increasing his capacity. Every betrayal was building his character. And when his moment came, when Pharaoh needed someone with wisdom and integrity, Joseph was ready, not because he was lucky, but because he was prepared in the quiet. Your quietness wasn't weakness, it was divine restraint. See, they needed you to be small so they could feel big. They needed you to be loud so they could justify their chaos. They needed you to be broken so they could pretend they were whole. But your composed spirit, your quiet strength, your refusal to match their energy, it held up a mirror they didn't want to look into. Every time you responded with grace instead of grudges, you reminded them of who they could be if they chose healing over hatred. Every time you chose to elevate instead of retaliate, you exposed the poverty in their spirit. Your abundance of peace made their scarcity of character obvious. And that's what infuriated them most. They couldn't break what God was building. They couldn't silence what heaven was speaking through your life. They couldn't diminish what the divine had already declared over you. So they did what weak people always do. They tried to convince you that you were the problem. But chosen ones don't break. We bend, we learn, we grow, we transform, and then we rise with a power that shocks everyone who underestimated us. Elijah knew this. After defeating 450 false prophets, after calling down fire from heaven, after proving God's power in the most dramatic way possible, what did he do? He ran, he hid, he got quiet. Because even prophets need silence to hear God's voice clearly. Even giants need solitude to process divine instructions. Even the chosen need quiet spaces to download heaven's next move. Your silence was sacred. Your stillness was strategic. Your quietness was divinely orchestrated. They called you too sensitive because your spirit could discern what their souls couldn't perceive. You felt the lies before they spoke them. You sensed the betrayal before it manifested. You knew who was real and who was performing because your spiritual antenna was calibrated to truth. That sensitivity they mocked, that was prophecy in motion. If they ever called you too sensitive, speak it now. I was never fragile, I was prophetic. Say it until you believe it. Say it until it rewrites every lie they told about your character. Say it until your own voice drowns out their judgments. Because the same sensitivity they criticized is the same gift that's going to elevate you beyond their reach. The sword is ready now. The weapon has been forged. The preparation period is over. And what's about to emerge from your silence is going to leave them speechless. Not because you're seeking revenge, but because you're walking in the fullness of who you were always meant to be. They thought your quietness meant you had nothing to say. They're about to discover you were just waiting for the right time to speak. And when you do, it won't be noise, it will be thunder. It won't be chaos, it will be clarity. It won't be weakness, it will be wisdom wrapped in power they never saw coming. Because what's rising from your silence isn't just you, it's the version of you they tried to prevent. You know what really broke them? It wasn't your words. It wasn't your success. It wasn't even your silence. It was your reflection. See, every time they looked at you, they saw everything they used to be, before they chose comfort over calling, before they traded their dreams for approval, before they let fear convince them that mediocrity was safer than magnificence. You became the walking reminder of their abandoned potential. And that was unforgivable. Think about it, chosen one. When did the attacks really start? Was it when you were broken? Was it when you were crawling through your darkest valley? The real venom came when you started healing, when you began to glow again, when your forgiveness became louder than their bitterness. They watched you do something they couldn't comprehend. You forgave what would have made others bitter. You loved what would have made others hate. You rose where others would have stayed buried. And it exposed them. Your glow didn't just light up the room, it lit up their lies. Every smile you chose over revenge, every blessing you spoke over curse, every time you turned the other cheek when they expected you to swing back, it made their darkness visible. Your grace became their guilt. Your peace became their torment. Remember Joseph? His brothers threw him in a pit, sold him into slavery, and told their father he was dead. But when famine came, when they needed what only he could provide, they had to face the very brother they betrayed, standing before them not bitter, not broken, but blessed beyond measure. That's you, beloved. The reason they can't stand to be in your presence now isn't because you changed. It's because you didn't change into what they expected. They threw you in the pit expecting you to stay there. They sold your reputation expecting you to disappear. They buried your name expecting it to stay dead. But here you stand not seeking revenge, but radiating resurrection. And it's killing them softly. You triggered the guilt they buried 6 feet deep. Every time they see your face, hear your name, or witness your progress, it's like a spiritual excavation. All that shame they thought they'd covered up starts clawing its way to the surface. Your very existence became their conviction. They wanted you bitter so they could feel better about their own poison. They needed you broken so they could justify their own brokenness. They required your failure to validate their surrender. But you refused to give them that satisfaction. Instead, you became the mirror they couldn't shatter, the reflection they couldn't escape, the evidence they couldn't deny. See, darkness can only exist when light is absent. But you kept glowing, even in the basement of betrayal, even in the wilderness of abandonment. Even when every voice said give up, you kept that fire burning. And your light, it exposed what darkness hides. It revealed their masks. It uncovered their motives. It illuminated their emptiness. Your healing journey became their judgment day, not because you condemned them, but because your transformation testified against their stagnation. You know what David said when he was surrounded by his enemies? You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, not away from them, not hidden from them, right in front of them. That's where you are now, chosen one. Eating at the table of your destiny while they watch from the sidelines, choking on their own regret. The distance they keep now isn't protection, it's punishment. They can't get close because your light burns too bright for their shadows. They can't engage because your frequency exposes their fakeness. They can't connect because your authenticity reveals their performance. Your presence became their prison. But here's what's beautiful about being chosen: you don't even have to try to be a mirror. It's automatic, divine, effortless. Your very being reflects heaven's nature, and when people are living in rebellion against their own purpose, your alignment becomes their alarm. They're not mad at you, they're mad at what you represent. You're the embodiment of their unlived life, the walking manifestation of the courage they never had, the breathing reminder of the faith they abandoned. You remind them of everything they gave up on, every dream they buried, every calling they ignored, every time they chose fear over faith, comfort over conviction, applause over authenticity. You represent the road not taken, the life they could have lived if they hadn't surrendered to mediocrity. And that's why they had to distance themselves. Not because you're toxic, because you're truth. Not because you're difficult, because you're different. Not because you're wrong, because you're a witness to what's right. Your healing journey became their judgment. Your breakthrough became their breakdown. Your rise became their reminder that they chose to stay down. But let's talk about that guilt they carry. It's not just guilt about what they did to you. It's guilt about what they didn't do for themselves. Every time they see you thriving, it whispers, "This could have been you too." That's the deepest cut. That's the wound they can't heal. Because facing you means facing the truth. They had the same opportunities, the same choices, the same chance to rise, but they chose differently. And now they have to live with that choice while watching you live with yours. So when they avoid you now, when they can't look you in the eye, when they change the subject, when your name comes up, understand what's really happening. You're not just a person to them anymore. You're a prophecy, a living testimony, a walking revelation of what happens when someone refuses to stay broken. Your glow exposes their shadow, not through accusation, but through demonstration. If you've been blamed just for existing too brightly, if you've been called too much for being authentic, if you've been criticized for healing too loudly, say it now, say it loud. My light exposes what darkness hides. Because that's not pride talking, that's truth walking. That's not ego speaking, that's destiny declaring itself. You are the mirror they couldn't stand to look at because you showed them what they could be if they had the courage to become it. And now that you know why they really stepped away, the question isn't whether you'll dim your light to make them comfortable. The question is, how much brighter are you willing to glow? Because what comes next will show you exactly why your brilliance was always meant to be undeniable. You know what haunts them at night? The fact that they spotted your greatness before you even glimpsed it in the mirror. While you were apologizing for taking up space, they were calculating how to contain the earthquake they felt in your presence. They weren't confused about who you were. They were terrified of who you were becoming. See, there's a difference between being noticed and being profiled. You thought they were just paying attention, but baby, they were conducting spiritual surveillance, watching your moves, studying your patterns, cataloging your gifts like they were mapping out a threat assessment. Because power recognizes power, and what they saw in you, it made their fake confidence tremble. You didn't even know your value, but they did. That's why every conversation felt like an interrogation. That's why they asked those probing questions disguised as concern. How do you always know things? Why do people tell you their secrets? What makes you so different? They weren't curious. They were collecting intelligence. You were being spiritually profiled because the kind of power you carry can't be taught in seminars or bought with degrees. It's encoded in your DNA, written in your bloodline, downloaded directly from the source. And when people encounter that kind of authentic force, they either bow or they plot. Guess which one they chose? That's why they tested you before you could even rise. Every boundary you set, they pushed. Every gift you displayed, they questioned. Every instinct you trusted, they called paranoia. They needed to know exactly how much light you carried, and more importantly, how much you were willing to dim it to keep the peace. They weren't trying to ruin you. They were trying to prevent your realization. Because here's the truth that cuts deep. They saw the prophet in you before you stopped doubting your own voice. They recognized the healer in you before you believed your touch could mend what was broken. They felt the leader in you before you stopped apologizing for having opinions that shifted rooms. Remember when Joseph's brothers saw his dreams and immediately started plotting? Genesis 37. They didn't hate the dreamer, they feared the dream. Because deep down, they knew those visions weren't fantasy. They were prophecy. And prophecy has a way of manifesting whether the prophets are ready or not. That's you. That's your story. Every time you walked into a room and the energy shifted, they felt it. When conversations deepened just because you were present, they noticed. When people started gravitating toward your wisdom, your peace, your unexplainable ability to see what others missed, they took notes. And instead of celebrating the gift, they started strategizing the containment. Your power scared people before you even knew it existed. That's why the attacks came early. That's why the sabotage felt so personal. That's why they tried to convince you that your intuition was imagination, your discernment was judgment, your boundaries were selfishness. They had to kill the confidence before it could birth the calling. But here's where their plan backfired. Every test they put you through only activated more of what they were trying to suppress. Every betrayal sharpened your discernment. Every rejection clarified your direction. Every season of isolation purified your purpose. They thought they were breaking you down. The universe was building you up. You see, chosen ones aren't chosen for comfort. They're chosen for courage. And courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the presence of purpose so strong that fear becomes irrelevant. That's what they saw in you. That's what made them panic. Not your perfection, but your persistence. Not your loudness, but your depth. Not your need to be seen, but your willingness to be real. The very thing they envied, they tried to destroy. The very gift they coveted, they attempted to sabotage. But power that comes from the source can't be stolen, manipulated, or erased. It can only be delayed. And every delay was just the universe's way of ensuring that when you finally stepped into your calling, you'd be so seasoned, so grounded, so unshakable that no weapon formed against you could prosper. Isaiah 54:17. Look it up. They saw your power long before you did because they were operating in fear while you were walking in faith. Fear has incredible eyesight when it comes to spotting what it can't control. And what they couldn't control was the way your presence made people hungry for more truth, more depth, more authenticity than the world was selling. You were never the problem. You were the solution they weren't ready for. So if your power scared people before you even knew it existed, if they tried to dim your light before you learned how to shine it, if they questioned your calling before you answered it, then declare this truth over your life right now. I'm not confused. I'm called. I'm not random. I'm rare. I'm not a threat to their peace. I'm a disruption to their pretense. Because what comes next will show you exactly how your enemies became your greatest teachers and why their rejection was actually divine protection in disguise. The mirror they held up to your power, it's about to reflect their own powerlessness back to them, and you're about to watch them crumble under the weight of their own envy while you rise into the fullness of everything they tried to prevent you from becoming. The surveillance is over. The realization has begun. They painted you as the problem child, the difficult one, the one who always starts drama. But here's what they'll never tell you: you weren't starting anything. You were finishing it. Every time you walked into that room, every time you opened your mouth to speak truth, every time your presence alone made the atmosphere shift, you weren't being disruptive. You were being diagnostic. Your very existence was exposing the infection they'd been hiding under band-aids and fake smiles. See, they needed a villain in their story. Someone to blame when their house of cards started shaking. Someone to point at when the lies got too heavy to carry. And you with your discerning spirit, your inconvenient questions, your refusal to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't, you became their scapegoat. But baby, let me tell you something that'll shift your whole perspective. You were never the villain. You were the mirror they couldn't stand to look into. Think about Joseph. His own brothers threw him in a pit, sold him into slavery, told their father he was dead. Why? Because his dreams threatened their comfort. Because his coat of many colors made their rags look shabby. Because his favor with God exposed their spiritual bankruptcy. They didn't hate Joseph, they hated what Joseph reflected about themselves. And that's exactly what happened to you. Every family gathering where you felt like the outsider. Every workplace where you were mysteriously excluded from conversations. Every friendship circle where somehow, inexplicably, you became the problem. You thought something was wrong with you. You questioned your own perception. You wondered if maybe you really were too sensitive, too intense, too much. But chosen one, what if I told you that your too much was actually just enough to crack their facade? Your awareness made them uncomfortable, because comfortable people don't change. Your authenticity threatened their performance because authentic people don't pretend. Your spiritual sensitivity exposed their emotional numbness, because sensitive people feel what others refuse to acknowledge. You didn't break them, you reflected them, and that reflection was so painful, so revealing, so undeniably true that they had to make you the enemy to protect their illusion of being the hero. But here's where the plot thickens, beloved. Here's where heaven's justice starts to unfold in ways that'll make your enemies wish they'd never touched you. Remember when you finally went quiet? When you stopped defending yourself, stopped explaining your heart to people committed to misunderstanding it, when you just withdrew. They celebrated at first. Finally, they whispered, "The drama queen is gone. Now we can have peace." But something strange started happening, didn't it? Their peace didn't feel peaceful. Their harmony felt hollow. The energy they'd been feeding off your light, your passion, your authentic reactions was suddenly gone. And without your reflection to distract them, they had to face what they'd been running from all along, themselves. The chaos they blamed on you, it intensified when you left. The dysfunction they said you caused, it multiplied in your absence. Because you were never the source of their problems, you were the detector. You were the spiritual smoke alarm going off, warning them that something was burning. And instead of checking for the fire, they just removed the alarm. David knew this feeling. Saul hunted him through caves and wilderness, convinced that David was the threat to his kingdom. But David wasn't trying to take anything from Saul. David was anointed by the same God who chose Saul. The problem wasn't David's ambition, it was Saul's insecurity. David's presence reminded Saul of what he used to be before fear and pride corrupted his heart. Your enemies didn't fear your actions, chosen one. They feared your awareness. They feared that you could see through their masks. They feared that your discernment would expose their games. They feared that your integrity would highlight their compromise. They feared that your growth would reveal their stagnation. They feared that your freedom would expose their bondage. Most of all, they feared that other people would start seeing what you see. Because when one person wakes up, it's an anomaly. But when one person's awakening starts waking up others, that's a revolution. And revolutions make comfortable people very, very nervous. So they tried to silence you before your voice could find its echo in someone else's heart. They tried to isolate you before your light could ignite someone else's flame. They tried to discredit you before your truth could set someone else free. But here's what they didn't count on. Truth doesn't need an audience to remain true. Light doesn't need permission to shine. And a chosen one doesn't need validation to fulfill their purpose. When you finally stopped explaining yourself, when you chose to protect your peace over proving your point, when you decided that your energy was too sacred to waste on people who wouldn't receive it, something powerful happened. You stopped being their victim and became their consequence. Your silence became their loudest critic. Your absence became their deepest void. Your peace became their greatest torment. Because without you there to blame, to project onto, to use as their emotional dumping ground, they had to face the truth they'd been avoiding. The problem was never you. Elijah experienced this too. Jezebel and Ahab made him public enemy number one, convinced he was destroying Israel with his negative prophecies. But Elijah wasn't bringing the drought, he was announcing it. He wasn't causing the famine, he was warning about it. His words didn't create the crisis. They revealed what was already happening beneath the surface. And when Elijah went into hiding, when his voice went silent, did Israel find peace? Did the rain return? Did the abundance flow? The drought intensified. The crisis deepened. Because removing the messenger doesn't eliminate the message. You are not the war, beautiful soul. You are the wake-up call. You are not the storm. You are the warning system that alerts people when storms are coming. You are not the earthquake. You are the seismic reader that detects when the ground is about to shake. And that's exactly why they tried to silence you. Because people would rather sleep through the alarm than wake up to face what the alarm is warning them about. But your silence isn't defeat, chosen one. It's strategy. Every word you don't waste on deaf ears is energy you're saving for divine assignments. Every argument you don't engage in is peace you're preserving for your purpose. Every explanation you don't give to people who've already made up their minds is power you're protecting for those who are truly seeking. Your withdrawal wasn't surrender, it was wisdom. You finally understood that some people don't want solutions, they want someone to blame. Some people don't want healing, they want someone to hurt. Some people don't want truth, they want someone to target. And you refuse to be their target anymore. Now watch what happens next. Watch how the very people who said you were the problem start having problems they can't solve. Watch how the ones who blamed you for their chaos find that the chaos followed them even after you left. Watch how those who said you were toxic discover that their own toxicity was just exposed by your purity. This isn't revenge, beloved. This is revelation. This is the universe showing everyone exactly who was the problem and who was the prophet all along. If you ever stopped explaining yourself just to protect your peace, if you ever chose silence over the satisfaction of being right, if you ever walked away from arguments you could have won just to win back your sanity, say it now, declare it with authority. I am not the war, I am the wake-up call, because what's coming next will show you exactly why heaven positioned you as the mirror, not the enemy, and why being the trigger was actually your greatest gift to a world that desperately needed to be awakened. The reflection is about to become a revelation. You've been watching it, haven't you? The sudden shifts, the unexplained chaos in their lives, the way their confidence cracked like glass hitting concrete. The doors that used to swing wide for them now slamming shut with a sound that echoes through your vindicated soul. And somewhere deep inside, you're asking, is this really happening? Or am I just seeing what I want to see? Chosen one, what you're witnessing isn't revenge, it's energy corrected. It's the universe doing what it always does. When someone touches what belongs to the divine, it restores the balance they tried to destroy. See, they thought they were playing checkers with your life, moving you around like a pawn, calculating their next strike, convinced they held all the power. But what they didn't know is that you were never on their board. You were on heaven's chessboard, and heaven plays a different game entirely. Every lie they told about you, it's now echoing in their own reputation. Every door they tried to close on you, it's now a wall blocking their own path. Every seed of destruction they planted in your garden, it's now growing thorns in their yard. This isn't coincidence. This is calibration. Karma isn't chaos, beloved. It's not some wild, unpredictable force throwing random punishments. Number karma is precision. It's divine mathematics. It's the universe's way of saying, you thought you could rewrite the laws of spiritual gravity? Watch this. They made a monument to their own downfall when they touched what God was using. Think about Joseph in that pit. His brothers thought they were ending his story, but every shovel of dirt they threw was actually building the foundation for his palace. Every tear they caused was watering the seeds of his elevation. They weren't burying him, they were planting him. And now here you are, watching their empire of lies crumble while your truth stands like granite in a hurricane. You remember when they mocked your boundaries, called you too sensitive when you wouldn't let them drain your light anymore? They laughed when you walked away from their toxic table, said you'd be back begging for scraps. But look at them now, hungry for the very peace they tried to steal from you, reaching for the stability they spent years trying to shake in you, searching for the joy they worked overtime to drain from your spirit. That's divine recognition, baby. That's heaven pointing at you and saying, this one is mine. And anyone who touches what's mine will feel the weight of cosmic correction. You didn't need to defend yourself. Heaven was already collecting receipts. Every screenshot of their lies, every witness to their manipulation, every moment they thought no one was watching, someone was. And that someone keeps books that never balance in favor of the wicked. David knew this when he faced Goliath. He didn't spend time explaining to the giant why he was wrong. He just picked up 5 smooth stones and let heaven handle the trajectory. The giant fell not because David was strong, but because David was aligned. You are aligned, chosen one, and alignment is a weapon they can't fight. So, when you see their world spinning out of control while yours finds its center, when their masks fall off at the exact moment your authentic self starts glowing, when their schemes backfire at the precise time your truth begins to flourish, don't you dare apologize for the divine timing. Don't you dare feel guilty for the way justice looks in your favor. This is what happens when someone wages war against a soul that heaven invested in. This is what happens when they bet against someone who was already written into victory before they drew their first breath. The silence around you hasn't been empty. It's been strategic. God pulled you back not to abandon you, but to load you. Like a slingshot, like an arrow, like a force they never saw coming. And now that force is in motion. Every person who walked away from you is now walking into their own lesson. Every relationship that crumbled around you is now teaching them what they lost. Every opportunity they blocked is now a door opening to something they can't even see. They thought they were writing your ending, but they were actually drafting their own karma. Elijah knew this feeling. Standing on Mount Carmel, watching the prophets of Baal run in circles, calling on gods who couldn't light a match, while he whispered one prayer and fire fell from heaven. That's you right now, watching them exhaust themselves on empty promises while your silent prayers move mountains. You don't have to say a word. Your elevation is speaking for you. Your peace is preaching sermons they can't escape. Your glow is the testimony that silences every lie they told about your character. If the silence has gotten suspiciously peaceful, declare this now. Divine justice is not delayed, it's strategic. It waits for the perfect moment, the moment when their pride is highest, the moment when they think they've gotten away with it, the moment when they're most convinced they hold the power. And then, cosmic correction, not with noise, not with drama, but with the kind of quiet authority that makes mountains move and giants fall, the kind of divine intervention that doesn't announce itself, it just arrives. You are witnessing the return of every tear they made you cry. You are watching the harvest of every seed of pain they planted in your spirit. And the crop is coming up in their yard now, not yours. Because you, beloved, were never the target. You were the test, and they failed spectacularly. But this is just the beginning. Because what's rising in you now isn't just vindication, it's revelation. They called you paranoid when you sensed the shift in the room before anyone else spoke. They said you were reading too much into things when your spirit picked up frequencies their minds couldn't decode. But what they labeled as overthinking was actually divine downloading. Your intelligence isn't just mental, chosen one, it's spiritual inheritance. You see what they don't want seen because God gave you eyes that pierce through flesh and see straight into souls. That uncomfortable feeling you get around certain people? That's not anxiety, that's angelic intelligence warning you about wolves in designer clothing. You've been playing spiritual chess while they're stuck on emotional checkers. While they move one square at a time, reacting to surface drama, you're calculating moves 7 levels deep. You see the generational patterns. You recognize the family curses. You spot the energy vampires before they even introduce themselves. And they hate that about you. Remember when David's own brothers mocked him for showing up to a battlefield they were too scared to enter? Your discernment makes cowards feel exposed. Your spiritual radar makes the counterfeit nervous. They can't hide behind masks when you're in the room because your spirit speaks fluent fake. But here's what broke their pride. You weren't guessing, you were knowing. That intuition they dismissed as women's intuition or old wives' tales, that's ancient wisdom flowing through modern vessels. You're not psychic, you're prophetic. There's a difference. Psychics predict the future. Prophets discern the present with heaven's perspective. Your discernment isn't paranoia, it's protection. Think about it. How many times did your gut tell you to walk away, and you ignored it, only to wish you'd listened? How many toxic relationships could you have avoided if you'd trusted that inner knowing the first time it spoke? Your spirit was trying to save you from lessons you didn't need to learn the hard way. But they convinced you to doubt your gift. They made you question your instincts. They told you to give people the benefit of the doubt while your soul was screaming danger. They weaponized your compassion against your discernment. No more. The same people who called your boundaries too much are now drowning in drama because they have none. The ones who laughed at your standards are now crying over situations your wisdom would have prevented. The ones who mocked your selectivity are now exhausted from fixing problems your discernment would have avoided. The ones who laughed at your boundaries now wish they had them. See, spiritual intelligence operates on frequencies the natural mind can't access. While they're reading body language, you're reading energy signatures. While they're listening to words, you're hearing what the spirit behind those words is really saying. While they're seeing faces, you're seeing masks. This is why Elijah could hear God in the whisper when others needed thunder. This is why Joseph could interpret dreams that baffled the wisest men in Egypt. This is why Daniel could see visions that kingdoms rose and fell upon. Your brilliance doesn't come from books. It comes from the book of life written before time began. But here's where it gets powerful. They tried to make you question your gift because they knew once you fully embraced it, you'd become unstoppable. A person who can see through lies can't be controlled by liars. A soul who discerns energy can't be manipulated by fake emotions. A spirit that operates in divine intelligence can't be fooled by earthly games. They needed you confused about your own power. But confusion season is over. You're not crazy for feeling energy shifts before they manifest. You're not dramatic for removing yourself from situations that don't feel right. You're not antisocial for protecting your peace from people who disturb it. You're awake in a world full of sleepwalkers. Your too much became your protection because it filtered out everyone who couldn't handle your frequency. Your sensitivity became your superpower because it detected toxicity before it poisoned your well. Your isolation became your elevation because it created space for your gifts to grow without interference. What they called rejection was actually divine selection. And now you understand. Your intelligence was never meant to make you popular. It was meant to make you purposeful. Your discernment wasn't given to win friends. It was given to win battles in realms they can't even see. So when they question your moves, remember, you're operating from downloads they don't have access to. When they challenge your choices, know this. You're following instructions they can't hear. When they try to make you explain your knowing, smile and remember, pearls aren't cast before swine, and divine intelligence isn't subject to human approval. If your too much became your protection, speak this now. I'm no longer explaining the genius God gave me. Because what's coming next will show you exactly why your spiritual intelligence was never a burden. It was your weapon, your shield, and your victory, all wrapped in one divine gift they could never take away. And the enemy knows that now. You know what they didn't see coming? The day you stopped showing up to their circus. The day you quit performing in their drama. The day you decided your energy was too sacred to waste on people who treated your light like a commodity. You didn't fight. You vanished. And everything shifted. See, they thought they had you figured out. Thought you were the type to beg, to chase, to explain yourself into exhaustion. They banked on your loyalty being stronger than your discernment. They counted on your heart being bigger than your boundaries. But chosen one, you did something they never expected. You disappeared without explanation. You ghosted without guilt. You left their stage while they were still performing. And now their piece is glitching because your energy is gone. Watch how they scramble now. Notice how the conversations feel hollow without your depth. See how their laughter sounds forced without your joy to bounce off of. Your absence didn't just leave a gap, it exposed the emptiness that was always there. You weren't the noise, they just needed your presence to feel okay in their pretense. Think about it. When you were there, they felt validated. Your attention made their shallow conversations seem profound. Your compassion made their cold hearts feel warm. Your light made their darkness tolerable. You were the mirror that reflected back the version of themselves they wanted to believe in. But the moment you stepped back, the illusion shattered. Now they're left staring at their reflection without your glow to soften the edges. They're hearing their own voice without your wisdom to give it weight. They're feeling their own energy without your fire to keep them warm. And it's terrifying them. You see, chosen one, your absence isn't just missing, it's revelatory. It's showing them exactly who they are when they don't have your light to lean on. It's forcing them to face the version of themselves they've been running from. They thought they could feast on your energy forever. Thought they could take your joy, your peace, your strength, and somehow stay full. But energy vampires only survive when there's a willing host. And the day you stopped volunteering for that role, they started starving. Now watch how they try to fill the void. See how they reach for cheap substitutes for the authentic connection you provided. Notice how they cycle through relationships, trying to find someone else who carries what you carried. But it never hits the same, does it? Because what you brought wasn't just presence, it was power. What you offered wasn't just company, it was communion. And what they lost wasn't just a person, it was access to the divine frequency you carry. Your silence is speaking volumes they never wanted to hear. Remember when they used to say, "You're too much"? When they complained about your intensity, your depth, your refusal to stay surface level? Now they're drowning in the shallow end, desperately missing the ocean they once called overwhelming. They called your passion dramatic. Now their life feels like a black and white movie. They labeled your emotions excessive. Now they're numb, wondering where all the color went. They said your standards were unrealistic. Now they're settling for crumbs, remembering the feast they walked away from. This is the power of divine withdrawal. This is what happens when someone protected by heaven decides to protect their own peace. You didn't just leave, you left with purpose. You didn't just walk away, you walked into alignment. And that alignment is so loud, so undeniable, that even in your absence, you're still the most present force in their life. Your name still comes up in their conversations. Your memory still haunts their quiet moments. Your standards still judge their compromises. You're not there, but you're everywhere, living rent-free in their regrets. They didn't lose you. They lost access to the version of themselves they pretended to be when you were around. See, when you were present, they felt chosen too. Your light reflected on them, making them believe they were shinier than they actually were. Your depth made them feel profound. Your loyalty made them feel worthy. Your love made them feel lovable. But that was borrowed brilliance, reflected radiance, secondhand shine. And the moment you withdrew that mirror, they had to face their true reflection, raw, unfiltered, unforgiving. Now they're confronted with who they really are without your grace to cover their flaws, without your patience to excuse their patterns, without your hope to believe in their potential. And chosen one, this isn't cruelty, this is clarity. This isn't punishment, this is protection. Because staying would have killed something sacred in you. Remaining would have dimmed a light the world still needs. Your absence is teaching them what your presence was worth. Your silence is screaming truths your words could never convey. Your distance is revealing the closeness they took for granted. They're learning that some people aren't replaceable, that some energy can't be duplicated, that some souls don't come with backup plans. You were never just another person in their life. You were the person who made their life make sense, the one who brought meaning to their chaos, the light that made their darkness bearable. And now that light has moved on to illuminate spaces that deserve it. This is the spiritual mathematics of withdrawal. When the right person leaves, everything else adds up to emptiness. When authentic energy exits, the counterfeit becomes obvious. When real love walks away, the imitation feels like starvation. They're not just missing you, they're missing the version of themselves that existed in your presence. The kinder, softer, more hopeful version. The one that believed in love, in loyalty, in the possibility of something beautiful. That version died when they chose betrayal over blessing, when they picked comfort over character, when they selected the familiar over the faithful. Your absence is the funeral for who they could have been. But here's the redemptive truth, chosen one. Your withdrawal isn't just their wake-up call, it's your breakthrough. Every step you take away from what doesn't serve you is a step toward what does. Every door you close behind you opens a new one ahead of you. Your absence from their story is presence in your own destiny. If they once called your absence a relief, but now call it regret, say this: I am the reset they weren't ready for. Declare it with the authority of someone who knows their worth. My energy is not a public utility. My presence is not a participation trophy. My absence is my answer. Because when you move in divine timing, even your exits become entrances. When you withdraw with wisdom, your absence becomes their education. And now, chosen one, as you stand in the power of your purposeful withdrawal, get ready to discover something even more profound. You know what they did when they realized your light couldn't be extinguished. They tried to water it down. When they couldn't steal your fire, they sent smoke. When they couldn't break your spirit, they tried to blur your vision. When they couldn't claim your throne, they tried to convince you it was just a chair. See, there's a difference between theft and dilution. Theft is obvious, you know when something's been taken. But dilution, that's the slow poison. That's the patient evil. That's when they take your pure wine and keep adding water until you can't taste the vintage anymore. They studied your moves like scholars studying scripture, watched your grace under pressure, memorized your responses to pain, took notes on how you turned wounds into wisdom, betrayal into boundaries, rejection into resurrection. They wanted the fruit, but they didn't want to plant the seed in the soil of suffering. Modern plagiarism meets ancient brilliance. They tried to copy your flow without walking your flood, tried to duplicate your peace without enduring your storm. They wanted your authority without your agony, your crown without your cross, your resurrection power without your crucifixion patience. But here's what they didn't understand about divine DNA: it can't be counterfeited. You see, what flows through you wasn't learned in a classroom, it was earned in a cave. What shines in you wasn't polished by applause, it was refined by abandonment. Your wisdom wasn't downloaded from a seminar, it was uploaded through suffering that would have shattered ordinary souls. They wanted the fire, but not the furnace that built it. Remember Joseph? His brothers tried to steal his coat of many colors, but they couldn't steal the dream that colored his destiny. They threw him in a pit, sold him into slavery, forgot his name, but they couldn't forget his face. Because what God plants in you, hell itself can't harvest. Watch this. They tried to profit off your pain without paying your price, tried to wear your anointing like a costume, tried to speak your language without living your testimony. But counterfeit always reveals itself under pressure. Fake gold melts, plastic diamonds crack, and borrowed light, it flickers when the original source walks away. That's why your absence became their exposure. You ever notice how they started glitching when you went quiet? How their confidence cracked when you stopped feeding their illusion? How their whole identity started short-circuiting the moment you stopped being available for their spiritual identity theft? Because they were never the source. They were just reflecting your light back at you, hoping you'd think it was theirs. But God don't make duplicates. See, your essence is encrypted with centuries of ancestral prayers. Your DNA carries generational breakthrough codes. Your spirit holds frequencies that were tuned in heaven before you were formed in your mother's womb. What runs through your veins isn't just blood, it's liquid legacy. What beats in your chest isn't just a heart, it's a time capsule of divine purpose. They can study your methods, but they can't replicate your source. They can mimic your words, but they can't manufacture your weight. They can copy your style, but they can't steal your substance. You know why? Because substance comes from being pressed until everything fake falls away. And you, chosen one, you've been in the winepress of betrayal, the furnace of abandonment, the refinery of rejection, and what came out wasn't just you. It was you distilled, you purified, you intensified into something they could admire but never acquire. That's why they tried to dilute it. If they couldn't steal it, maybe they could water it down, make you question your own potency, make you doubt your own power, convince you that what makes you brilliant is just normal, that your depth is just drama, that your sensitivity is just weakness, that your discernment is just paranoia. But eagle eyes can't be diluted by pigeon perspectives. Your brilliance isn't just mental, it's spiritual. Your intelligence isn't just cognitive, it's cosmic. What you carry isn't just talent, it's transmission. You're not just gifted, you're appointed. You don't just have abilities, you have assignments. And here's what makes their attempted dilution so tragic. While they were busy trying to water down your wine, they were missing the miracle. While they were focused on stealing your thunder, they never noticed the storm that was brewing. While they were trying to dim your light, they were blinding themselves to the dawn that was breaking. You can't steal what's encoded in someone's divine DNA. They thought your power was in your performance, but your power is in your presence. They thought your authority was in your words, but your authority is in your walk. They thought your anointing was in your actions, but your anointing is in your atmosphere. That's why when you enter a room now, fake starts fidgeting, lies start loosening, masks start melting, because what they tried to dilute has only gotten stronger. What they tried to water down has only gotten purer. What they tried to steal has only gotten more secured in the vault of divine protection. Look at David. Saul threw spears at him, but couldn't touch the anointing on him. Tried to kill the king, but couldn't cancel the kingdom. Because when God sets you apart, hell can't tear you apart. So if they tried to profit off your pain without paying your price, if they attempted to harvest what they didn't plant, gather what they didn't scatter, reap what they didn't sow, declare this with the authority of someone who survived attempted spiritual identity theft. I am the original. God don't make duplicates. Because what's coming next will show you exactly why their imitation always fails and why your authenticity always prevails. You've spent decades trying to squeeze yourself into spaces that were never designed for your wingspan, dimming your voice in rooms that needed your thunder, apologizing for taking up space when you were born to expand territories. They told you to be smaller, quieter, more palatable. But here's what they never understood. You weren't born to fit in. You were born to wake nations from their sleep. This has never been about validation. This is about vibration. Your glow isn't cosmetic. It's cosmic. Every time you walked into a room and felt the energy shift that wasn't social anxiety, beloved, that was your frequency disrupting the fake peace they built on lies. When conversations died when you arrived, when people suddenly got quiet, when the superficial couldn't breathe in your presence, that was your spirit calling out the counterfeit without saying a word. You thought you were the problem, but you were the solution they weren't ready for. Remember when they called you too intense? When they said you were too deep for casual conversation? When they made you feel like your passion was a burden, your wisdom was unwelcome, your truth was too much? They weren't rejecting you, they were rejecting the mirror you held up to their mediocrity. Joseph's brothers saw his dreams before he did. They threw him in a pit not because he was weak, but because they recognized the king in him before he wore the crown. You've been carrying the same anointing, the same calling that makes average people uncomfortable. But here's the revelation that's going to shatter everything you thought about your journey. Every rejection was redirection. Every door that slammed was heaven saying, not here, not them, not now. Every season you spent in the wilderness wasn't punishment, it was preparation for a platform too powerful for the unprepared to handle. You didn't survive to tell a sad story. You survived to be a living prophecy. That pain you carry, it's not scar tissue, it's sacred equipment. Those tears you cried in silence, they weren't evidence of your breaking, they were the baptism that prepared you for your becoming. Every betrayal that cut you deep wasn't meant to destroy you. It was meant to develop you into someone who could carry light without being corrupted by applause. You think David complained when Saul threw spears? Number, he kept playing his harp. He kept worshiping through the warfare because he understood something you're just now remembering. When the assignment is bigger than the opposition, the anointing always outweighs the adversity. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was warfare. Your patience wasn't passivity, it was prophetic positioning. And now it's time. The same people who dismissed you are about to witness your elevation. The same voices that said you'd never make it are about to watch you rise in ways that make their small thinking look foolish. Not because you're seeking revenge, but because your time has come. And when God decides to showcase His chosen, the timing is always perfect and the impact is always undeniable. You're not just recovering from your past. You're walking into your purpose. You're not just healing from heartbreak. You're emerging as a heart mender. You're not just surviving the storm. You're becoming the calm that others will seek when their own storms hit. This isn't about proving them wrong anymore. This is about proving heaven right. Right about the investment it made in you when it allowed you to walk through fire and come out smelling like frankincense. Right about the choice it made when it marked you for greatness before you even knew your own name. Your story isn't just survival, it's sacred instruction for others. Every setback was a setup. Every delay was divine strategy. Every moment you thought you were forgotten, you were being forged. The universe doesn't waste pain on the powerless, it refines gold in the furnace. And you've been in the fire long enough to emerge as pure treasure. You're not just the light. You're the spark that lights the torch in others. When you speak now, broken people will hear hope. When you move now, stagnant people will feel stirred. When you rise now, defeated people will remember they have wings. Because your breakthrough isn't just personal, it's prophetic. Your healing isn't just individual, it's intergenerational. The ancestors are cheering, the angels are applauding, and the very people who tried to bury you are about to discover they planted a seed. You were never meant to blend into the background. You were designed to be the foreground of transformation. You weren't called to follow the crowd, you were commissioned to lead the charge. Every attack you survived, every assault on your character, every attempt to silence your voice, it was hell recognizing heaven's assignment on your life before you did. But now you know, now you see, now you understand that your pain had a purpose, your struggle had a strategy, and your story has the power to shift the spiritual atmosphere wherever you plant your feet. The wilderness season is over. The waiting room is closed. The preparation phase has ended. You are not an accident. You are not a mistake. You are not too much or too little or too late. You are right on time for such a time as this, for such a moment as this, for such a movement as this. If you know your story isn't just survival but sacred instruction for others, speak it now. I'm not waiting for permission. I am the movement. Say it until your spirit believes it. Declare it until your destiny aligns with it. Because the world isn't waiting for perfect people, it's waiting for prepared people. And you, chosen one, have been prepared in ways that most will never understand, but all will eventually witness. The eagle doesn't ask the sparrows for permission to soar, and you don't need their approval to awaken nations. Your time is now, your season is here, your moment has arrived. And what comes next will prove that everything you thought was working against you was actually working within you to birth something extraordinary. They used to love your company, didn't they? Back when you laughed at their jokes that weren't funny. Back when you nodded at their stories that didn't add up. Back when you played small enough to make them feel tall. They called you sweet then, called you loyal, called you understanding. But something shifted the day you stopped swallowing their lies with a smile. The day you stopped being easy to gaslight, they started calling you difficult. The moment you stopped absorbing their projections, they labeled you bitter. When you refused to dim your discernment just to keep their comfort, suddenly you became the problem. People liked you until you stopped being easy to lie to. See, chosen one, your light was never the issue. Your light was beautiful to them until it started doing what light does, until it started illuminating, until it began pulling back the curtains on their carefully constructed theater of deception. They admired you when you were a lamp they could control, but the moment you became a lighthouse steady, unmovable, cutting through their fog, they realized you weren't decoration, you were revelation. You were the storm warning in their blue sky. Think about Job. The moment he stopped accepting their explanations for his suffering, his friends turned on him. The second he refused to agree that his pain was punishment, they became his accusers. Not because Job changed, but because his refusal to break exposed the poverty of their theology. That's what's happening to you right now. Your freedom is forcing them to confront their bondage. Your healing is exposing their wounds. Your peace is highlighting their chaos. And instead of being inspired by your transformation, they're triggered by it. This isn't fear of you, beloved. This is fear of what your freedom reveals about their chains. Every time you set a boundary, you remind them they've been living without walls. Every time you speak truth, you show them how long they've been speaking lies. Every time you choose yourself, you expose how they've been abandoning themselves. You became the mirror they couldn't break. And that's when the real attack started, wasn't it? When you stopped being their echo and became your own voice. When you stopped reflecting their dysfunction and started reflecting God's design for your life. They didn't mind your light when it was pointing away from them. But the moment it turned around, the moment your glow started exposing the masks they wore, the games they played, the lies they lived, suddenly you weren't safe anymore. Suddenly you were dangerous. Your brilliance doesn't blind them, it exposes where they've been hiding. David faced the same fury, not when he was tending sheep in obscurity, but when his anointing started showing, when his praise could calm demons that their religion couldn't touch, when his faith could fell giants that their fear had fed for 40 days. The moment your truth became undeniable, you became unbearable to those still living in denial. But here's what they never saw coming. Here's what they couldn't calculate in all their scheming and plotting and whispering campaigns against you. You weren't just discovering your truth, you were becoming their truth. Every lie they told about you started manifesting in their own lives. Every curse they tried to place on your name boomeranged back to their doorstep. Every trap they set for your fall became the pit they fell into themselves. Because when you touch the anointed, when you come against someone heaven is positioning, you don't just fight flesh and blood. You fight the very force that called them out of darkness into marvelous light. And that force doesn't lose. Watch them now. Watch how their peace has become chaos since you walked away. Watch how their certainty has become confusion since your clarity left the room. Watch how their unity has become division since your truth is no longer there to hold their lies together. You weren't holding them up, you were holding them accountable. And the moment that accountability walked away, their house of cards collapsed. They thought they were eliminating a threat. They were eliminating their conscience. They thought they were removing an obstacle. They were removing their opportunity to grow. They thought they were silencing an enemy. They were silencing the very voice that could have saved them from themselves. But you're not responsible for their choices, chosen one. You're only responsible for your truth. And your truth has become a sword they can no longer duck, dodge, or deflect. Elijah didn't chase down Jezebel's prophets. He just spoke truth, and their lies couldn't survive in the same atmosphere. He didn't fight their darkness. He just let his light shine, and their shadows were exposed. That's what you've become. Not a warrior swinging wildly, but a lighthouse standing steady. Not shouting over their noise, but speaking truth so clearly that their lies sound hollow even to their own ears. You've become the standard they can no longer ignore, the plumb line they can no longer avoid, the truth they can no longer escape. And it's driving them mad. Because every day you rise, you remind them they're still falling. Every day you heal, you show them they're still bleeding. Every day you choose love over bitterness, forgiveness over revenge, growth over grudges. You become living proof that their excuses are just that, excuses. You've become the truth that makes their lies impossible to believe. So if the truth in you made the fake in them flinch, if your authenticity exposed their performance, if your freedom revealed their bondage, if your light pulled the mask off their darkness, say it now, chosen one. Say it with every fiber of your being. I became the sword they couldn't silence. Because that's exactly what you are. Not a weapon of destruction, but an instrument of revelation. Not here to tear down, but to unveil. Not called to condemn, but to illuminate. And now that you know what you are, now that you understand why they fought you so hard, the question becomes, what will you do with this dangerous truth you've become? You became the sword they couldn't silence. And now you understand why the universe had to break you open before it could build you up. Why you had to walk through that valley of shadows before you could stand on this mountain of revelation. Why every betrayal, every abandonment, every moment they tried to dim your light was actually God turning up the voltage. You are not an accident, chosen one. You are an assignment. What happened to you wasn't random cruelty. It was strategic preparation. Every tear you cried in secret was sacred water nourishing the roots of your purpose. Every night you questioned your worth was heaven preparing you to know your value beyond human validation. You weren't broken. You were being broken open, like a seed that has to crack before it can grow, like a diamond that has to endure pressure before it can shine, like gold that has to pass through fire before it becomes pure. And now you stand here not bitter, but better, not wounded, but wise, not victim, but victor. The door is closing behind you now. Can you feel it? That chapter where you begged for their acceptance, where you shrunk yourself to fit their comfort zones, where you dimmed your light to ease their insecurity, that door is shutting with divine finality. There is no going back to who you were before you knew who you are. There is no returning to relationships that required your silence as the price of admission. There is no reopening conversations with people who mistook your depth for drama, your discernment for bitterness, your boundaries for betrayal. The Lord your God has brought you through the Red Sea, and those waters have closed behind you. What tried to drown you can no longer reach you. Who tried to enslave you can no longer touch you. As it is written in Isaiah 43:18-19, forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. You are the new thing God is doing. You are the way being made in the wilderness. You are the stream flowing in what looked like a wasteland. Every person who walked away from you made room for who's walking toward you. Every door that closed in your face cleared the path to the door that's opening for you. Every voice that went silent gave space for the voice that's about to speak life over your future. You thought you were losing everything. God was positioning everything. You thought you were being isolated. God was preparing your elevation. You thought you were being forgotten. God was writing your name in permanent ink across the fabric of destiny itself. So right here, right now, declare this over your life. Say it out loud. Say it in the comments. Say it until it echoes in the chambers of your heart. I am chosen. I am protected. I am purposed. What was meant to destroy me has only made me dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. I walk in divine authority, carry heaven's frequency, and shine with unstoppable light. The door behind me is closed. The path ahead is cleared. I am who God says I am. If this message found you, it's because your breakthrough is not coming, it's here. Share this with someone who needs to remember they're not forgotten. They're positioned, not overlooked, but being prepared. Not abandoned, but being aligned. Your testimony is not just your story, it's your assignment. Your healing is not just your victory, it's your weapon. Your rise is not just your vindication, it's your ministry. Because chosen ones don't just survive to tell their story. They survive to rewrite the ending for everyone still trapped in the beginning. And your story is just getting started.